A quick like and subscribe really helps our channel grow and allows us to bring you even more amazing content. Thank you for your support. It started on an ordinary Tuesday evening, the kind that melts into your memory like butter on warm bread. My friend Lily had come over for dinner. She was what people called a people person, always bubbling with enthusiasm, her wide smile lighting up any room. I'd known her for years, but I was beginning to worry that her inquisitiveness was turning into a kind of obsession, especially concerning my girlfriend, Maya. Upon our first introduction a few months ago, Maya had been shy, and who could blame her? She was stepping into a circle of friends who had known each other for ages, and I felt a twinge of protectiveness towards her. While Lily greeted her with a warm embrace and relentless questioning, I brushed it off, thinking perhaps it was just Lily being herself. But over time, I saw how Maya's shy demeanor would slip into discomfort whenever Lily would pry into her personal life, questions about her family, her job, even the small scars on her wrists that she often covered with long sleeves. I could sense Maya's unease but tried to ease it by changing the subject or steering the conversation in a different direction. That night, I made pasta, a simple but delectable dish that usually brought us all together. However, the tension simmering beneath the surface lingered like an uninvited guest. Halfway through dinner, Lily leaned across the table, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "So, Maya, why don't you tell me about the therapy you were in? I've been dying to know what that was like." I saw Maya's cheeks flush, her fork pausing mid-air, and I felt the heat rise within me. My heart raced as I struggled to find the right words. It wasn't merely curious questioning, it felt invasive, and in that moment, my protectiveness flared. I turned sharply to Lily, perhaps too sharply. "Can you just drop it, Lily? Not everyone wants their history dissected at the dinner table." The silence was thick, as if the air had been sucked out of the room, Maya's eyes wide with surprise and a flicker of relief, but I could also see her disappointment. I felt bad almost instantly for raising my voice, but I was too wrapped up in my determination to shield Maya from Lily's relentless probing. It felt like a necessary, albeit awkward, confrontation that I hoped would put an end to Lily's intrusive nature. After dinner, things were tense. Lily muttered a half-hearted apology, but I could see she didn't grasp the gravity of her actions. Maya's eyes, usually a vibrant mix of green and brown, appeared dulled by discomfort. She was sweet and didn't want to create waves, but I knew she felt uneasy around Lily, and I couldn't shake the guilt spiraling within me for yelling at someone who had meant no harm. That night, I lay awake, replaying the moment in my mind. I wondered if I had overreacted, if maybe I could have found a gentler way to enforce boundaries with Lily. I cared about her, too. She had always been helpful and supportive in past relationships, but this time it felt different. As weeks passed, I tried talking to Lily, attempting to mend whatever rift my outburst had created. But she remained distant, and every attempt I made seemed to elicit more frustration from her, which pushed me further into my shell. On the other hand, Maya and I grew closer as she began to confide in me more. Our conversations turned from light-hearted banter to deeper discussions about her past, her struggles, and her triumphs. I saw the person she truly was, a fighter under the surface, and that made me question whether enforcing boundaries with Lily had been worth it. Until one evening, after another dinner filled with awkward silences and strained jokes, Maya gently placed her hand on mine. She looked into my eyes and said, "I don't need you to protect me from her, I can handle it. But don't you dare push me away for her." It was a wake-up call, and I realized in that moment that I was being unfair to her for not trusting her capacity to handle the situation and unfair to Lily for not giving her the chance to admit her mistakes. That night, I decided to fix things, not just for me, but for Maya too. So, I called Lily, filled with newfound conviction, and invited her to join us for brunch that coming Sunday. When the day arrived, I took a deep breath and confronted her in front of Maya, articulating how I felt about her questions and how they affected Maya, not accusing, but inviting her to understand. Shockingly, she listened, really listened. I saw that familiar glimmer of understanding in her eyes, and that day, the air became lighter as we all discussed boundaries and respect in relationships. It felt liberating, like we were redefining our friendship for the better. Later that evening, as we departed, Lily hugged me and promised to be more mindful. Maya smiled warmly, and for the first time in months, I felt that comforting optimism about our relationships, a refreshing reminder of the complexities of friendships and love. A few weeks later, I received a message from Lily, asking about Maya's writing ambitions and how she could support her. I chuckled. It seemed Lily had genuinely dug deep in her heart to unpack her inquisitive nature. Life felt balanced again, reminding me of the delicate dance we all engage in when connecting with others, a dance, often complicated, yet ultimately worthwhile when met with honesty and understanding. I thought about the message while sitting at my desk, the late afternoon sun filtering through the blinds, casting long, warm shadows across the wooden surface. The way Lily had reached out felt like a gentle olive branch after a storm, something I had not anticipated but desperately needed. Her newfound interest in Maya's ambitions struck me as sincere, perhaps even a realization of her previous intrusiveness. I also couldn't shake off the feeling that my explosion of frustration had not just changed the dynamic of our relationships but had forced everyone, including myself, to take a step back and reassess boundaries. My feelings for Maya lingered in the back of my mind. They sparkled with a mix of pride and affection as I recalled how passionately she spoke about weaving her fears and dreams into narrative threads. I contemplated how hard she worked, often into the early hours of the morning, hunched over her laptop, chasing her elusive dreams. To see her finally getting recognition from conditions outside our little circle felt like fireworks within me, igniting a sense of gratitude for the seemingly chaotic path that had led us all here. When I presented Lily's message to Maya during our weekend coffee ritual, a comforting routine where laughter punctuated our still morning moments, she perked up, her eyes dancing with enthusiasm. "I think it's sweet," she exclaimed, the genuine warmth encapsulating her more than the caffeine ever could. As we discussed the best responses to send, I dug deeper into my thoughts. Maya, maybe this could encourage her to be more supportive rather than just nosy? My intent was to prod her to see it as a chance for healing, for growth, and a possible bridge forward. Throughout the week, my optimism clung to me, unwavering, as if I had gathered energy from the harmony that surrounded us. I began noticing small changes within our group dynamics. Lily's inquisitiveness shifted from being prying to a form of support. She began asking more about Maya's work in the positive light of genuine interest. During our usual game nights, instead of steering conversations toward the personal, Lily inquired about story ideas and offered her own interpretations of Maya's themes, which sparked delightful discussions and sparked inspirations. The months of tension seemed to evaporate, replaced by the sweetness of camaraderie regrowing gently. Yet, the trip was not without its nuances. My instinct to protect Maya sometimes felt overwhelming. I would catch myself watching Lily closely, waiting for signs of her curiosity morphing back into the invasive territory we had danced around before. Maya noticed the change in me, and during one quiet evening as we strolled along the lit-up streets, she turned to me, her expression serious yet soft. "You know, I can handle Lily," she assured, and in her voice lay the strength that had drawn me to her in the first place. "Her curiosity comes from a good place now. She just needed a little nudge to realize how much more significant it is to listen than to pry." In that moment, I recognized the foundation Maya had built, not just for herself in her writing, but in our friendships too. I felt both admiration and resignation, a quiet acceptance that we all must learn, stumble, and yet eventually grow into a better version of ourselves. Thus, I put aside my protective instincts and focused instead on my own growth, fostering a healthy space where the line between support and nosiness could stand strong and clear. With time, I slowly allowed my defenses to lower. I was learning, just as Maya was, that relationships thrive not on the avoidance of conflict but through engagement and resolution. An unexpected evening rolled in when I checked my phone to find a notification. It was a group message from Maya, presenting a small gathering, an invitation to share her writing project with friends, including Lily, who had no idea she'd be involved. The anticipation mixed with nervous excitement fluttered in my chest as I read Maya's words aloud, the rhythm of her voice echoing through our cozy living room. "I'm inviting you all over next week for a reading and discussion. Bring your open minds, and maybe some snacks." As the date approached, I marveled at how much had transpired within a short span. Though apprehensive, the prospect of unearthing these unspoken conversations excited me. On the evening of the gathering, as friends settled into our living room, I sensed a comforting energy filling the air, like a soft blanket ready to wrap around us. Lily arrived promptly, her eagerness palpable, and I watched how she interacted with Maya. They exchanged anticipatory glances, and Lily listened intently as Maya shared her thoughts and insights on her work and the journey she took to get there. I felt proud, my heart swelling as I noticed the respectful curiosity Lily demonstrated, and perhaps it was then that I realized this night was not merely about Maya showcasing her writing. It was an exploration of friendship, vulnerability, and personal growth within the space we shared. And so, as Maya began to read, her voice resonating beautifully in the hushed room, I leaned back, enveloping myself in the warmth of connections rekindled, recognizing that life, in all its complexities, often finds a way to heal if we gather the courage to confront it. Many years down the line, those moments would live with me, whispering reminders of the growth found along this intricate journey of friendship and love. And in that beautiful small room filled with words, laughter, and understanding, we found our dance, soft, gentle, yet vibrant against the backdrop of all we had endured. As the years unfurled, life continued weaving its intricate tapestry, capturing threads of joy, sorrow, and unexpected revelations. Those evenings with Maya and Lily remained etched in my memory, like a favorite song whose melody, once heard, resonates forever. The three of us settled into a new rhythm. It felt as if we had taken each other's hands, stepping in sync to a beat of shared ambitions and mutual respect. Maya blossomed in her writing. She began getting published in local magazines and sharing her work at open mic nights. I watched her shine brighter with every word she shared, the girl who had once been hesitant now standing tall at the podium, radiating confidence, her stories captivating everyone around. Lily, too, found her own sense of purpose. Inspired by Maya's artistic journey, she explored her passion for photography. She would often invite us to join her on weekend shoots, the three of us wandering through streets, capturing candid moments of life. As we traipsed through parks, urban corners, and hidden alleyways, I became fascinated by how Lily would frame her shots, the way the light could transform an ordinary scene into something extraordinary. In those moments, it felt like we were painting a larger picture together, more than just a collection of memories, but a testament to how our keen interests intertwined beautifully. Still, lurking beneath the surface, I could feel the remnants of those early conflicts, whispers of residue from our past misunderstandings. Occasionally, even in our newfound harmony, my mind would drift back to that day when I had exploded at Lily for her intrusive curiosity, wondering if the shadows of it would ever truly fade. There would be moments when she would joke about her nosiness, laughter filling the air, yet I couldn't shake the feeling of needing to protect Maya, that instinct to shield her from anything that might taint her blossoming confidence. It was a delicate balance, the weight of our past pressing lightly on my shoulders, and yet I found comfort in knowing our bond was stronger than those fissures. One evening, as we gathered at our usual spot, a local cafe adorned with fairy lights and the aroma of fresh pastries wafting in the air, Maya surprised us both. She shared that she'd been accepted into a writing retreat, an opportunity she had been coveting for years. The excitement in her eyes was contagious, a spark igniting between us. "I can't believe it," she exclaimed, her voice ringing with disbelief. "I actually made it." Lily and I erupted in joyous applause, our cheers mingling with the sound of clinking coffee cups and the soft hum of chatter surrounding us. Yet, as I basked in the delight of her moment, I could sense the undertow of fear that often came up during periods of immense personal growth, the fear of change. But what if it's not what I expect? Maya pondered aloud, her brows knitting together in concern. In that instant, it was easy for me to forget my silent reservations. I leaned closer. "But what if it is? What if this is the beginning of something incredible?" I responded, remembering how we had navigated through uncertainty together. And as Maya brunched a motivational speech into the air, Lily chimed in, reminding us both of the beauty that lies in risk. That evening, we took our time sipping on rich, dark coffee and indulging in sweet pastries. We exchanged dreams, fears, and heartbeats, creating a mosaic of our aspirations. It felt liberating to witness how far we had come while knowing the journey was far from over. Weeks passed, a gentle flow guiding us toward Maya's retreat date. In the hustle and bustle of preparing, I received a call from Maya after she had settled in at the retreat house. Her voice trembled with a mix of excitement and vulnerability. "I thought I'd be terrified, but everyone here is so supportive. I feel my heart opening up in ways I never knew were possible." I could hear the warmth in her tone, a reflection of how far she had come. As I listened, I realized that she was carving out not just her identity as a writer but also reshaping how we all understood our connections to one another. When Maya returned, there was a lightness about her, a deeper understanding that seemed to transcend words. One evening, as we gathered on my porch, she shared stories of vulnerability shared among writers, of finding not just advocacy but community. That night, as the stars blossomed overhead, those shadows of past misunderstandings and echoes of our complex beginnings simply vanished amidst the laughter and the warmth of friendship. Reflecting on our journey, I understood our dance. Life is a dance, indeed, sometimes solo, sometimes in pairs, often a whirlwind of unpredictable turns and dips, but always brighter on the other side when the music stops. Time has its way of binding souls, if only we dare to unfurl our hearts. I cherished that, for the growth we had experienced was profound, roots woven through the complexities of our relationships had forged a canopy of understanding and strength, a shelter in which we could hone our dreams uninhibited. And so, beneath the vastness of those shimmering stars, I held that night close, a vivid reminder to embrace all the intricacies threading through the heart of friendship, love, and shared journeys. No, sleep, all my childhood bedrooms had something in common. Only now that I live alone did I realize what that was. The first time I noticed the peculiar pattern was when I stood in the center of my new apartment, a modest one-bedroom tucked snugly into the heart of the city. It was a place of my own, yet it felt eerily familiar. The walls were painted soft beige, the floor a warm wood, and the gentle hum of the city outside filled the air like a nighttime lullaby. But as I unpacked boxes and hung up my belongings, it struck me, every bedroom I had ever occupied as a child had a specific element that seemed to echo through the years. Each space had a window that faced the exact same direction, southeast. I remember as a kid, lying in bed and staring out at the clouds shifting colors as the sun set, thinking that the universe was painting portraits just for me. However, something darker lurked behind those windows, a feeling that so many moments of joy were teetering on the edge of something menacing. My parents divorced when I was 10, and I began to wonder if perhaps it wasn't just a coincidence. As my mind wandered down those troubled lanes of memory, images flashed through my mind, that old, decrepit house we lived in after the split. The peeling wallpaper, the creaky floorboards, and especially the shadows that danced in the corners whenever the sun dipped low. I could almost hear the whispers in the dark. They became companions during sleepless nights, always promising to help me, while making it clear that their comfort came at a price. With each move to a new bedroom, the shadows seemed to follow me, lurking closer each time. At first, I thought them just figments of my imagination, remnants of childhood fears stemming from my fragmented family life. Now, in my own space at 30, the memory was no longer vague. As I stood by that southeast window, I could feel a chill creeping along my spine, as if I were being beckoned back into the heart of those tales I had tried so desperately to forget. I dismissed it as mere nostalgia, but then came the whisper, just faint enough to trick my mind into believing it was just the wind rustling the trees. "Come play," it said, a sweet lilt that was both inviting and gut-wrenching. My hands trembled as I decided to leave my safe haven for the evening air, hoping some fresh air would ground me. Just outside, the world was alive, families, couples, friends all bridged by laughter as they mingled in the twilight. But even in a crowd, I felt wrapped in a blanket of loneliness. After a few minutes of walking, I turned and headed back to my apartment, to gather my thoughts and clear my head. The whole way home, I noticed those same wild shadows clawing at the edges of my vision, just as they had in my youth, edging closer with every step. Upon entering my small space, the silence suffocated me, every creak of the floorboards echoing in a way that made me feel less alone yet completely abandoned. I walked over to the window, the familiarity wrapping itself around me like an old coat, and realized that I was still that lonely child, trying to make sense of the world while seeking solace in forgotten corners. In an impulsive act, I decided to pull the curtain wide open, letting the moonlight spill into the room. To my shock, my heart raced at a sudden movement outside. The shadows, once whispers in the corners, pooled just beneath the window in unearthly shapes, tantalizing me with nostalgia and secrets I had long ignored. My pulse quickened, and I thought of all the times I had ignored the signs throughout my life, closing the doors on thoughts that summoned dread but also hinted at discovery. In that moment, I felt at the precipice of something monumental, a challenge to confront my past rather than flee from it. But instead of fear, I felt liberating curiosity, inviting those mysteries back into my heart. I placed a hand over the glass, feeling that odd mix of warmth and chill as I whispered softly, "What do you want from me?" The response was a gentle swell, the shadows dancing closer as if inviting me to join them. Here I was, finally ready to embrace all that I had avoided for years. About a week later, as I still sat enveloped by those night whispers, I caught a glimpse of a memory, a dream I used to have of running through an endless field, with children playing and laughing without a care. Those memories shifted like sand in an hourglass, forming new shapes in my mind. I began writing them down, detailing everything, every whisper I heard, every touch I felt in the corners of my rooms, and eventually, the truth emerged. Those shadows, which had once loomed over me as dark memories, were reminders of a childhood filled with magic. I had hidden from my feelings for far too long, but now, I was ready to turn every belief I held about my past upside down. That playful call to come play wasn't about fear, it was about reconnecting with that part of me I had buried under the weight of adult responsibilities and heartache. The closer the shadows danced, the more I saw them as potential and promise rather than threats. And like any good story, the shadows remained ever present, threading the past with my future, allowing me to weave together a narrative that made sense at last. That revelation breathed new life into my heart as I embraced the space I called home, a sanctuary full of the joys I had once known. Yet, as I finally snuffed out the light late one night, I felt a stir of energy, a soft rustling brushed against my skin. Just by following the path back to the shadows of my childhood, I discovered that they weren't gone. They were always there, waiting for me to acknowledge them, ready to share those deep, sweet secrets once again. It turns out, every childhood bedroom could be sanctified in a way if we dared to listen to the stories echoed within them. Update: I've since taken up writing again, turning my childhood tales into stories I share online. The response has been overwhelming. It seems I wasn't the only one who carried these shadows, but I've come to realize that my words breathe life into them. A small community has formed around my confessions, each of us unraveling our own histories and discovering shared experiences in those whispered moments of fear and joy. What I once thought was a burden has now become a gift, a testament to the power of storytelling and the bonds it can forge between those who dare to listen. As I sat in my dimly lit room, the soft hum of my computer the only companion aside from the shadows that danced joyfully along the walls, I began to sift through the memories that had shaped my childhood, memories that were now spilling onto the screen like ink from a well-used pen. With each tap of the keyboard, I felt a comforting release, a connection to those childhood bedrooms that had been more than just spaces where I slept. They were vessels holding pieces of my spirit, echoing with laughter, tears, secrets, and fears. In each one, there was something eerily familiar, a strange presence that, until recently, I hadn't fully acknowledged. My first room in the house on Maple Street had been the brightest, painted a cheerful yellow that caught the morning light just right, but underneath that sunny veneer, I had felt eyes watching me, always lurking in the corners where shadows mingled with stuffed animals and forgotten toys. Then, there was the small bedroom in the apartment my family moved to when I was 8, where in the middle of the night I would hear whispers from the closet, like a conversation between old friends, secrets shared only in the dark. I thought I had simply been imaginative, that I was a child prone to flights of fancy. But as I delved deeper into my past through the stories I shared online, my fellow storytellers confessed similar experiences, echoes of their own childhoods that mirrored mine, all rooted in similar anxieties and lonely nights. It began to dawn on me that perhaps what I perceived as specters of my past were, in fact, manifestations of the fears and growing pains all children experience but often bury as they transition into adulthood. Slowly, this realization morphed into a kind of solidarity among us, a shared space where we could explore our fears without judgment, where vulnerability became our strength. Each story prompted reflections on what those rooms meant to us, not just as childhood havens, but as the first steps into understanding ourselves. I vividly remember one night, typing away late into the serenity of solitude, when a particular message popped up on my screen. It was from a fellow storyteller I had come to admire, someone who wrote with a raw honesty that resonated with me. They spoke of the first time they had seen their own shadow reflecting back at them, a friend who, at first glance, felt like an intruder in their own world. Those words struck a chord. It was as if they had pulled from my own diary. We engaged in a conversation that stretched into the early hours, exploring our connections to those rooms, and the peculiar comfort we derived from the understanding that we were never truly alone, even in our darkest moments. This exchange ignited a spark, pushing me to dig even deeper into my psyche. I began to write not only about fear but also about joy, about the afternoons spent building blanket forts, the discovered wonders of an old book collection, and crayon-scribbled maps of imaginary worlds. I painted my childhood in colors more vibrant than the dismal shadows I had clung to for so long. These explorations led to unexpected revelations, and I started to realize my last bedroom before leaving for college was surrounded by a spectrum of feelings, excitement for the future mixed with anxiety for the unknown. The presence I felt there was different, a comforting whisper reminding me that it was okay to stand on the brink of adulthood and still carry the echoes of childhood behind me. When my stories turned into a kind of catharsis, I knew I had stepped past the threshold of nostalgia and into the realm of acceptance. Writing transformed into an affirmation of who I was and who I was becoming, a journey shared with others facing their own darkness and light. As I closed my laptop one night, I felt a gentle weight lift from my chest, a knowing that those rooms, those intangible specters that had haunted my thoughts for years, were simply parts of my story, pieces of a puzzle that I had now started to reshape. Each echo was no longer a reminder of fear but a testament to my resilience and growth. I felt empowered, not just for myself, but for others who found solace in our shared experiences. It was in this space, I realized, that the shadows didn't just watch, they listened, and with every word we shared, we grew a little lighter, a little braver, and a little more human. I wouldn't trade this journey for anything, and perhaps what I had once feared was not about what watched me, but about what I could accomplish when I allowed my story to take flight, merging memory with creativity, and uncovering the beauty that lived beneath the surface. And as the world outside grew darker, I felt a comforting glow radiating from within, reminding me that perhaps, in every bedroom, past, present, and future, there lives a piece of me, a part of my journey that is always worth sharing. With each tale I wove, I found myself diving deeper into the shadows of my past, peeling back layers I had long buried under a facade of normalcy and routine. I reminisced about the tiny rooms that housed my childhood dreams, the way the yellow wallpaper in my first bedroom seemed to sigh in relief whenever I would tell stories to the pastel stuffed animals that adorned my bed. I would drape my childhood fears over those walls, and in return, they whispered back with every creak of the floorboards and soft rustle of the curtains. As I would often confide in those inanimate listeners, I gradually realized that these stories were as much for them as they were for me, a way to channel my feelings into something tangible. Yet, as an adult, I often felt cut off from that magical space where imagination thrived, especially when overwhelmed by life's relentless grind. But now, in sharing my words online, it felt as though I was invited back into that sacred place, offering not just a glimpse of my heart but an open window for others to peer through and find a reflection of their own experiences. Each post sparked a flurry of comments, confessions from strangers who echoed my childhood fears, narrating their own encounters with flickering shadows and lingering feelings that refused to be silenced. Sometimes they were lighthearted, and sometimes they struck chords that reverberated deep within, each interaction nurturing a community that felt like magic, a comfort I'd long sought. One night, as I sat under the soft light of my desk lamp, tapping away with eager fingers, I came across someone who stood out among the rest, someone named Eli. Eli shared that he lived alone in a small studio apartment, much like mine, and like me, had begun to feel haunted by the echoes of his childhood bedrooms. He spoke of how he had a relentless cycle of dreams, the same dream where he was a child again, lost in his old house, searching for something he could never grasp. His dreams always left him feeling hollow in the morning, soaked in a longing he couldn't articulate. I felt an immediate bond with him, his vulnerability resonated with my own hidden struggles. Without hesitation, I replied, fumbling for the right words to let him know he wasn't alone in this surreal experience. The conversation blossomed, with late-night exchanges that turned into shared late-night writing sessions. We grew closer, our narratives intertwining like vines climbing a forgotten wall, feeding each other's flames of creativity while pulling back the curtain of despair together. But it was one Saturday, while we were video chatting, that Eli revealed something that would change everything. With a trembling voice, he asked if I had ever felt a palpable presence in my childhood homes, something that felt as alive as the stories we shared. I paused, recalling late nights spent laying wide-eyed under the covers, where I felt I was not truly alone, a comforting presence lying just beyond the threshold between sleep and waking. A shiver cascaded through me as I said, yes, watching the flicker of recognition spark in his eyes. He confessed that his dreams often felt less like nightmares and more like invitations, urging him to return to the house he grew up in, a space laden with secrets and whispers. We shared stories of our childhood rooms, Eli's walls plastered with the praises of his ever-watchful parents, mine holding the scars of the imaginary beasts that lurked just out of sight. That night, a thought lingered in the back of my mind, and it took root. The more we talked, I had considered visiting my childhood home, hoping to illuminate the dark corners, not just to confront what lay concealed there, but to embrace the memories I had long deemed burdensome. As I floated the idea to Eli, I was surprised by how fervently he urged me to do so. What if, he said, there's something there waiting for you? Something that could provide answers? After a long drive filled with uncertainty, I arrived beneath the familiar roof that once enveloped my childhood with love and dread. Darkness had settled into the night, casting a thick, oppressive air over the house. Each creak of the wooden floor was a reminder of the secrets it had held for decades. I walked into my old room, small, anachronistic, but powerful in its ability to resonate with the echoes of old laughter and sadness. I spoke aloud, recalling memories with the fervor of someone yearning for connection, thanking the walls for housing my dreams and fears. It was then that I felt a warmth, a flicker in the air, and as I closed my eyes, images flooded my thoughts, moments stitched together in a vibrant tapestry of joy, and a few dark threads of shadowed apprehension. But what struck me most was not the fear, but rather the love I felt for that sacred space, and for every version of myself that had passed through it. I closed my eyes, embracing the poignant tranquility that blanketed the room, and allowed myself to remember the promise I made long ago. I would not let fear constrict my voice. When I opened my eyes again, tears brimming with both sorrow and gratitude flowed down my cheeks. Standing there, I understood that in confronting my past, each bedroom and each story, I had reclaimed my narrative. As I returned to my apartment, fortified by this experience, I sensed the presence of something greater, a palpable connection not just to my own story, but to Eli and our blossoming community, a space where we all chose to share the dreams, fears, and beauty of our pasts. And as I sat to write that night, the glow from my desk lamp a soothing reminder of the warmth we all craved, I knew that every story shared only expanded the reach of our collective imagination. My past wouldn't confine me, it would nourish my creative spirit, urging me to dance with shadows and find the light, to remind all who listen that together we could illuminate the darkness, painting a bridge from our childhoods to the present, a bridge wrapped in the threads of storytelling, making us a little lighter, a little braver, and forever connected. There I was, standing in the corner of a dimly lit room, watching as people laughed and mingled, the soft thrum of music setting a carefree backdrop to the evening. It was supposed to be a fun night out, a chance for me to impress Melissa, my date, who had caught my eye a few weeks ago at the coffee shop where I worked. We had hit it off swiftly, sharing jokes and secrets over cups of steaming lattes, and on that Friday night, I felt hopeful that this party would deepen our connection. But a mere hour into the gathering, my excitement began to dwindle as a strange pit of disappointment settled in my stomach. I had made my way to the bar to grab water, feeling slightly parched from the small talk I had been engaging in. I turned to Melissa and asked if she would mind grabbing 2 glasses while I full-on chatted with a few friends who had arrived. With a playful smile, she agreed. Minutes passed, and I noticed her standing at the bar, chatting with some of her friends and completely neglecting my request. I could feel a sense of annoyance creeping up me. It wasn't that big of a favor. I mean, how hard was it to just fill a glass with water? When I finally got her attention, I decided to approach the bar myself, making my way through the warm crowd. I didn't want to make a scene, but as I reached the counter, claims of thirst whispered in my mind. When I returned with my 2 glasses, I found her laughing with a group, her head thrown back in mirth, showing no signs of having noticed my absence. I felt a mix of irritation and frustration clashing within me. Shouldn't she have cared that I was waiting? After all, if the roles were reversed, wouldn't I have done the same for her? I set the glasses down, approached her too calm demeanor, and quipped lightly, "Did you not hear me ask for water?" Her response was more flippant than I had anticipated, akin to waving a dismissive hand at a child's tantrum. "Chill out. It's just water. We're having fun, aren't we?" I had considered myself easygoing, perhaps even too easy at times, but this felt different. I wasn't just parched, I felt like an afterthought. I thought about trying to shrug it off, to laugh with her, and pretend her nonchalance didn't bother me. Yet that wasn't the case. Something deep inside tugged at me, urging me to pay attention to the growing fissure in our evening. "You wouldn't want to take water to someone else, would you?" Her chuckle faded. Clearly, I had struck a nerve, but instead of a calm discussion, I was met with her raised eyebrows and a tone that meant an impending storm. I felt my stomach churn as a deeper realization set in for me. This wasn't just about water, it felt like our dynamic was revealing an underlying issue. These clues stripped the evening of all its sweetness. I stepped away from the group, indicating I needed a breather. I felt guilt wash over me. I liked her. Was I really about to let a glass of water become the reason I'd leave? After taking a moment in the rear garden, surrounded by the muted sounds of the party drifting through the open door, something shifted. I didn't want to keep fighting for her attention. It stung, but leaving felt like reclaiming a small piece of my dignity. As I walked out, I glanced back at Melissa, immersed in her laughter, oblivious, and I realized that sometimes, situations highlight the disparities in how people value one another. I felt a bittersweet relief washing over me. Deep down, I knew this wasn't a friendship destined to grow. Later that night, as I lay sprawled in my room under softly glowing fairy lights, I reflected on what happened. Maybe I wasn't the biggest villain, perhaps, it was time to revamp what I sought in relationships. Maybe my needs were simple but important, and if she couldn't meet them, or even acknowledge them, that was worth noting. That little moment revealed more about her indifference, and ultimately, I would rather spend my time with someone who wouldn't just quench my physical thirst, but my emotional one as well. Update: a few days passed, and Melissa texted me, casually asking when we could hang out again. I considered the message, my mind aligning all the reasons to say no. Instead, I replied honestly. I mentioned that I appreciated the good times but felt like we were on different wavelengths, and perhaps it was best to part ways. To my surprise, she responded quickly, expressing mild frustration but also acceptance. "I guess we just weren't meant to be," she replied, a little too nonchalantly. I sat there staring at my phone. Yes, it was bittersweet, but it also felt liberating, like I was finally setting my own boundaries, opening up space for someone who might just care enough to hand me a glass of water when I asked for it. I set my phone down, staring blankly at the room around me, filled with the soft hues of early evening light filtering through the sheer curtains. The silence seemed thicker now, as if the air had gained weight after our exchange. I found myself reflecting not only on that last date but on that entire week, the parties I had attended, the conversations that felt more like choreographed performances than genuine connections. My heart had pangs of loneliness even amidst laughter and chatter. It was all so superficial. I cherished depth, but depth seemed harder to find. I thought about that moment at the party when all I had wanted was a simple glass of water. It felt monumental then, a test of sorts. Would he care enough to step away from his own fun for just a minute to make sure I was comfortable? But instead, I had been met with uncomfortable laughter and a flippant brush-off, the kind of casual dismissal that stung far more deeply than anyone could have anticipated. As I wandered into the kitchen to make myself a cup of tea, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the glass of the cupboard door and winced. My eyes looked tired, a little sad. I wasn't entirely sure what I was looking for anyway, some validation? Understanding? Or perhaps just a partner who saw me as I truly was, rather than a checklist they could tick off at a party. Sipping the warm tea, I tried to focus my thoughts. I could feel the echoes of their laughter still surrounding me, but rather than drown in it, I wanted to find a way out into the quiet. I wanted to rediscover myself in the silence. The next few days passed in a blur. I stayed busy, working through stacks of paperwork during the day, and on weekends, I buried myself in hobbies I had neglected. A long-forgotten passion for painting took precedence one afternoon as I dipped my brush into vibrant colors. Each stroke on the canvas seemed to soothe my restlessness, allowing buried emotions to flow out, a startling catharsis emerging from the swirl of blues and greens. Yet amid that serenity, I couldn't shake off the tangled cords of loneliness. Somewhere deep down, I still craved companionship, a connection that felt real. By the time I got the invite for a friend's upcoming birthday party, I hesitated, contemplating whether I should go. This time, however, the thought didn't fill me with dread. In fact, it carried a sense of anticipation. I dressed up that evening with a newfound liveliness. I chose an outfit that made me feel confident, a pair of bright, flowy pants and a top that shimmered just enough to catch the light. Maybe, with a little luck, I would meet someone who understood the value of communication, even for small things like water. It would be clear from the start that I wanted more, a dual respect that could blossom in little interactions. Once at the party, I first wandered toward the snack table, grabbing a few bites while scanning the crowd. I laughed as I recognized familiar faces and exchanged pleasantries. For the first time in a while, I felt weightless in my own skin, unburdened by expectations, both from myself and the people around me. Eventually, I found a quiet corner on the patio, where soft music fueled gentle conversations. I admired the way the stars began to twinkle above. It was mesmerizing, grounding, and perhaps inviting for possibilities. That's when she approached, Maya, an acquaintance from a mutual circle. She had a genuine smile that lit up her face, and her laughter resonated with warmth and candor. I was surprised at how easy it was to talk to her, as if we were old friends catching up. Mid-conversation, I asked her if I could grab a glass of water and, to my delight, she immediately grabbed mine and her cup matter-of-factly, sliding them both toward me without second-guessing. As she casually remarked how important hydration could be, I couldn't help but smile. For the first time since that last encounter, I felt seen, as if I had been handed a lifeline rather than just a drink. Over the next hour, we shared stories about life, quirky hobbies, travel dreams, and the absurdity of dating mishaps. I felt my heart lightening as I realized the conversation flowed effortlessly. There was no pretense, just two people connecting over shared experiences and laughter. It didn't matter if this led anywhere romantic, it was the dialogue and the companionship that felt renewing. Amidst all this, I could feel my earlier hesitations fading away, not because I feared being alone, but because here, in this little pocket of the universe, I knew I had worth, and I wouldn't settle for anything less. As the night wound down, we exchanged numbers, promising to stay in touch, both of us leaving perhaps with the potential for friendship or something deeper. Walking home under the starlit sky, I took a deep breath, a smile drawing across my lips. I didn't feel like I had lost it all, rather, I felt that I was finally starting to gain everything I wanted, not just in a partner, but also the self-assurance of knowing what I deserved. In the days that followed, I wondered if any of this would lead anywhere more than light-hearted chats over coffee. Still, the journey of rediscovering myself felt infinitely more significant than focusing on finding a romantic partner. As those weeks turned into months, each conversation with Maya, no matter how simple, helped build a foundation that eventually turned delightful, sometimes surprising. I realized it was always the little things that mattered, just like a glass of water did that night. I chuckled softly to myself, reflecting that maybe, finally, I had learned to navigate my own path, and perhaps I had even found someone who could walk alongside it, glass in hand, genuinely invested in more than just where life would lead us. And so, as I curled up on my couch one quiet evening, I felt a peace I hadn't encountered in a long time, and as I drifted off to sleep, I knew, I wasn't the asshole for leaving a party. If anything, I had made room for something far better than I had ever hoped for. The following weeks unfolded like a gentle sunrise, warm and promising. I took my time getting used to this new chapter. I was buoyed by my decision, and it sparked something within me, a renewed sense of self-worth that felt as refreshing as my long-awaited glass of water. I began to explore hobbies I had set aside for far too long, painting during the quiet afternoons, journaling under the naked branches of winter trees, and even experimenting with new recipes after a cold spell had made takeout an almost too recurrent theme. With each brushstroke or new ingredient, I felt greater clarity wash over me, like I was reclaiming pieces of myself that I didn't know were lost in the routine of trying to please others. Yet, while wallowing in my solitude, I found myself thinking about the deeper connections I craved. Sometimes, I'd scroll through my phone, catching snippets of conversations from my friends, discussing their heartbreaks or busy careers, which only reminded me that even in shared experiences, people saw the world so differently. It wasn't just about parties or social gatherings anymore, it was about feeling valued in the smallest acts, of someone genuinely listening to my needs. One crisp Saturday afternoon, I received a text from a friend I hadn't heard from in a long while. Jess always had the right level of kindness blended with mischief that made her captivating to be around. She wanted to know if I'd join her and a few others at a local coffee shop for an art festival starting next weekend. Memories of our spontaneous adventures flickered in my mind, and without hesitating this time, I agreed. The closer the date approached, the more I found myself alternating between excitement and apprehension. What if I froze again? What if someone needed something from me, and I felt constricted by the desire to appease? Those thoughts clung to me like shadows, but I understood they stemmed from the residual anxiety of that last party. And yet, how could I forge new memories without risking a little vulnerability? The day arrived, and the old coffee shop was even more enchanting than I remembered, with chunky vintage furniture and soft jazz humming in the background. The walls were adorned with local artists' works, vibrant colors splashed across canvases, each whispering a story I longed to dive into. Spotting Jess was easy, her laughter cut through the bustling chatter like sunlight piercing through the trees. We greeted each other with enthusiastic hugs and lingering eye contact that reassured me we were still on the same wavelength. As our group settled in, sipping on our drinks and discussing everything from art to dreams, I found solace in belonging. There was a comfort in the laughter, and despite my earlier reservations, I discovered how liberating it felt just to be seen and heard. Halfway through our gathering, I excused myself for a moment and made my way to the restroom. Glancing in the mirror, I smoothed down my hair and took a deep breath. I realized that I had spent too long doubting my worth, afraid of facing discomfort and potential heartbreak. As I returned to the table, I couldn't help but smile. I was welcomed back to the group with open arms, a seat saved beside Jess. The conversation flowed, laughter crescendoed, and someone even asked about my recent painting venture, prompting a glimmer of pride within me to share my latest piece. That evening turned into an impromptu art critique followed by plans to visit galleries around town. It felt like a tapestry of warmth was woven around us all, threading kindness, creativity, and understanding together. I left the venue feeling lighter, the tension that had momentarily wrapped around my chest uncoiling like the tendrils of dawn breaking through. As I drove home, the streetlights flickering past, I reflected on the day, a mosaic of rekindled friendships, laughter shared over cappuccinos, and the beauty of allowing myself to step outside of what once felt like looming shadows. For the first time, I understood what it meant to be genuinely present with others and myself. I realized I didn't have to mold myself into someone's ideal collection of traits to find companionship. I simply needed to allow myself to exist as I was. Looking at the horizon ahead of me, painted in nothing but the gentle hues of twilight, I whispered to myself, I'm not the asshole for leaving that party, but rather, I am the architect of my own journey, and finally, I could feel that faint hope blossoming with every step I took. Every Friday, as twilight began to drape its velvet shadow over my town, I found myself slipping into an abandoned version of our world, a realm I had only begun to understand. My name is Sarah, and at 32, I was navigating the messy waters of adulthood with the grace of a swan on ice. I had a job I loved as a graphic designer, a small but cozy apartment, and a close-knit group of friends who would gather over wine and laughter every weekend. Yet beneath the surface of my seemingly idyllic life simmered a strange phenomenon. Every Friday, with the onset of night, I stumbled into this alternate reality where everything felt both eerily familiar and paradoxically different. It started innocuously enough, just the usual urge to take a solitary walk to clear my mind after a hectic week. One evening, I meandered through the park, where the scent of damp earth filled the air and streetlights flickered like stars awakening, when I felt a sudden chill dance along my spine. That was the moment everything changed, as I found myself staring down an alleyway I had never noticed before. The air grew thick and heavy as I stepped inside, and what unfolded felt like a scene from a long-forgotten dream. It was a fractured mirror of our world. Skyscrapers leaned unnaturally, their windows shattered, and the streets were littered with remnants of a bustling life that once thrived. The silence was almost deafening, punctuated only by a soft whisper of wind that seemed to carry the echoes of laughter and conversations long lost. Each week, I wandered deeper, meeting shadows that mirrored my own life, shapes of people I recognized but were stuck in time. There was Jason, my ex-boyfriend, sitting forlornly on a park bench with an unreadable expression, and my childhood friend Lily, trapped in a loop of tying her shoelaces, eyes glazed and unseeing. It was agonizingly beautiful and heartbreakingly tragic all at once. Even though a part of me wanted to shake them awake, to remind them they were part of a world that moved forward, I felt an inexplicable bond with them, a sense of shared longing for what had been lost. Every encounter brought more questions than answers, and a knot of guilt lodged itself in my chest. Was I abandoning these versions of my friends? I found comfort in the stillness they provided, a stark contrast to the chaos of life outside this broken reality, yet it was a bittersweet solace. The emotions tangled within me, weaving a fabric of unresolved feelings I had yet to confront. Driven by a mix of curiosity and a need for closure, I questioned my own reality. Was I merely a spectator in this parallel existence, or had I become an unwilling participant in the decay of what used to be? After weeks of wandering, something extraordinary happened. One Friday, as the sun dipped below the horizon, swallowing the remnants of daylight, I found myself holding the hand of past Sarah, a version of me caught in a moment of vulnerability, crying over the remnants of lost dreams. In that moment, I realized she wasn't merely a reflection, she was a part of me, and her pain was my pain, an echo of my fears and regrets. I squeezed her hand tight, and a warmth surged between us, an understanding that we were allowed to feel all of it, the joy, the sorrow, the unfinished stories. I took a breath, exhaling the weight of expectations, and whispered promises of resilience, coaxing her to step into the light of possibility. When the dawn broke, pulling me back to my own world, I carried that moment with me. I understood now what this strange journey had been about. It wasn't just about fleeing into shadows but confronting what lay within. The following Fridays came and went, and with them, I chose to embrace both the hazy memories and the bright future waiting for me. I sought therapy, started journaling again, and reached out to the people I had neglected, rebuilding those connections with renewed vigor and honesty. In reflection, every weekend became an opportunity to grow, to heal, and to evolve. I never saw that abandoned world again, but perhaps it existed in the whispers of my mind, urging me to confront the echoes I had long kept at bay. It was strange but liberating. There was no need to return to a world that was never mine to mend. Life persisted, with its beautiful messiness, and I was ready to embrace it all anew. Update: a few months later, after harnessing my newfound sense of hope and strength, I invited my friends over for a gathering. I shared my experiences with them, how fear and joy intertwined in our lives, how we each carried shadows of past selves within us. To my surprise, they opened up too, revealing their struggles, the dreams that slipped away, the relationships that faded. We laughed and cried together, transforming what could have been an ordinary evening into something profoundly beautiful. In that moment, I realized that while my journeys into the abandoned world were over, the true exploration of life had only just begun. The warmth of our shared stories lingered in the air long after my friends left that evening, their laughter echoing in the silent corners of my home like a comforting blanket. I sat among the remnants of our gathering, the empty glasses, the discarded pizza boxes, the faint smell of burnt candle wax, and let the realization of our newfound connection wash over me. It struck me how easy it was to get lost in the grind of everyday life, focusing on the mundane tasks and brushing aside our emotional landscapes as if they were clutter. But that night, we had revealed our vulnerabilities. We peeled back the layers we wore for the world, showing glimpses of the pain and passion that simmered beneath. It was a cathartic release for all of us, a pact to keep our hearts open, no matter how scarred they may have been. As the days went by, I found myself seeking the presence of my friends more often, each gathering becoming a ritual of sorts, small fires of connection. Against the chill of life's uncertainties. We shared coffee before work, late-night walks under stars that appeared more vivid than ever, and even those awkward moments of silence that spoke volumes about our growing trust. The abandoned world where I once escaped felt increasingly distant, a fading echo of solitude in contrast to the vibrant tapestry we were weaving together. Yet, sometimes, an unfamiliar shadow would brush against my thoughts, a faint reminder of the solitude I once found comforting. One Friday night, as I prepared for another gathering, the air thick with anticipation, I glanced out of my window and spotted a figure in the distance. An overwhelming sense of déjà vu washed over me. I recognized the silhouette from my previous encounters within that parallel realm. It stood still amidst the swirling wind, a tangible piece of my past resurrected in the real world, its presence unsettling yet oddly magnetic. My heart began to race with a mixture of fear and disquiet. Had my journeys truly ended, or did the abandoned world still seep into my reality? I pushed the thought aside and joined my friends, our conversations flowing like an unbroken river, laughter bubbling through the thick evening air, but the figure lurked in the corner of my mind, demanding attention. It became an unwelcome guest at our feast, lingering there, causing my smile to falter and my laughter to sound hollow at times. As the night carried on and my friends' stories unfurled, I fought to focus, yet every time I glanced outside, there it was, steadfast and unyielding. That following night, sleep evaded me like a wary wild animal, and I found myself staring out into the dark. Something compelled me, an insatiable thirst to confront whatever ghost of my past was anchored in the shadows. I slipped out of my house, leaving behind the warmth of camaraderie, unsettling excitement coursing through me. As I approached the figure, I felt a magnetic pull drawing me closer, despite the nagging fear that crept into my thoughts, the urgency to uncover the truth wrapped around me like a scarf on a cold winter night. When I finally stood before it, the figure morphed into an ethereal version of myself, an echo from the abandoned world, draped in garments that seemed woven from air and despair. "You left me behind," it whispered, the voice unfamiliar yet intimately familiar, echoing the unresolved parts of my spirit. The words dug deep, but instead of fear, a wave of recognition washed over me. "I didn't leave you, I transformed," I replied, my voice steady despite the shivering uncertainty in my heart. We stood there, two halves of the same story, the weight of everything unspoken suspended in the air like a thick fog. "You can't run from what you've been," the phantom self cautioned, "but you can accept it." The truth nestled within me at that moment. No longer was I that figure trapped in desolation. I understood now that both aspects of myself were valid, not separate but interconnected, each yearning for recognition and acceptance. With a newfound resolve, I stepped forward, embracing the other me, feeling the cold slip away and warmth fill the air between us. "I understand you," I murmured, "and I won't forget you." It had all led to this nexus, this moment of convergence of past and present. The figure shimmered before me and gradually began to dissolve like mist at dawn. In that transformative moment, I realized that our struggles didn't define us but rather enriched our existence. They interwove into the fabric of who we were and who we were becoming. When I returned home, I sensed a profound stillness around me. I slid back into bed, cradled by the quiet, the echoes of our gathering still mingling with my thoughts, now clearer and brighter. Each relationship, each struggle, each laugh shared had not just been an escape from the abandoned world but a pilgrimage toward wholeness and acceptance. As I drifted off to sleep, I understood that my journey had only just begun, the threads of connection promising the warmth of love, hope, and understanding in a world both expansive and beautifully intimate. Update: a week later, I received an unexpected message from one of my friends, who revealed that after our last gathering, they had decided to pursue a passion they had long abandoned. Through our conversations, they realized how much they had been missing out on by burying their dreams. They were taking steps to reclaim their life, inspired by that evening's vulnerability. I felt an overwhelming tide of gratitude, knowing that the parallels of our lives would continue to entwine in unexpected ways, far beyond what I had initially imagined. Each Friday now carried a promise, a chance to expand our worlds together, simultaneously exploring the depths of our pasts while forging paths into a brighter future. As the weeks passed, our Friday gatherings became something I eagerly awaited, a soft beacon amid the tumult of everyday life. Each meeting transformed into a safe harbor where we could shed our masks, nurturing a bond that felt both fragile and resilient at the same time. We shared stories of progress and setbacks, each tale echoing with laughter or laced with the bittersweet recognition of our past regrets. I watched my friends dive headfirst into their passions. Clara picked up painting again, her once dormant creativity swirling back to life in vibrant hues, while Jake, a former musician, dusted off his guitar, the strings quivering in anticipation as he strummed melodies that had long been silenced. On one damp Friday evening, as a gentle rain tapped on the windows, we gathered in my living room, sipping tea and wrapped in the warmth of our camaraderie. The air was thick with shared ambitions and relentless hopes, and as the rain pattered softly against the glass, Clara stood up, her hands shaking slightly as she held a newly completed painting.
I painted this for all of you, she announced, her voice
vulnerable yet steady. We turned our attention, and I felt breathless as the canvas came into view, alive with swirling colors that seemed to dance in harmony. In the center of the piece stood a radiant sun, the golden rays extending outward, touching smaller images woven into the fabric of the painting, notes from a musical score, vibrant flowers in an untamed garden, and silhouetted figures embracing beneath the sky. Each element echoed our shared stories, bringing the impossible together in a dazzling display of possibility. My heart swelled as Clara shared the inspiration behind her painting, revealing it to be a tribute to our newfound resolve, a reminder that life, much like her art, was a blend of light and shadow. Each story, each contribution, tied into the greater tapestry of who we were becoming, a poignant reflection of our intertwined journey. But underneath the laughter and paint, there lurked an unspoken undercurrent. I could feel it creeping into our gatherings like the fog that sometimes settled in the valley, a lingering fear that perhaps this sense of rebirth was all too fragile, that the momentum we'd built might slip through our fingers like grains of sand. So, that night, as we wrapped up our discussions and prepared to bid each other farewell amid hugs and promises to return, I decided to let my anxious thoughts spill out. What if this all goes away? I asked, the weight of apprehension evident in my voice. What if we lose this spark? Silence enveloped the room, a collective breath held tight, until Jake broke it, his expression earnest. But what if we don't? What if we just make it a part of our lives, weave it into everything we do? It's worth the risk, isn't it? His words resonated within me, filling the space with an understanding that while the fear of change was a valid one, the courage to embrace it was something we all shared now. Our paths would not always be straight, and we would face obstacles ahead, but we had each other, the threads of our stories now woven together in ways that felt indelible. In the weeks that followed, we established a routine, a cycle of inspiration that pushed us beyond mere discussion. Clara organized a mini art show displaying her work inspired by our gatherings, and Jake penned lyrics for a song that captured the emotional essence of our shared journey. I struggled, too, dipping my toes into writing for the first time, words spilling onto the page as I explored the shadows I once thought were too dark to face. We became a collective of dreams, a sounding board for support, where failure became a learning tool rather than a conclusion. Yet, each Friday, there was still the nagging thought in the back of my mind, would this last? What would happen when life interjected and we found ourselves distanced again? One night, amid songs and artwork, Clara shared something that shook the very core of my worry. She reminded us that our relationships, those threads that connected us, might stretch, but they would never break. The vulnerability we had forged would allow our paths to remain intertwined, even during hard times. I pondered her words deeply as the weeks rolled by, the thoughts spinning like a top in my mind as I observed the changes in all of us. While life wasn't linear, perhaps the connections we built could guide us through its winding paths. Then, one crisp evening, as the trees outside began to shed their leaves in a vivid mosaic of color, so too did we shed our old selves, admitting the depth of our fears and joys. With every shared meal, every laugh, and the tears that sometimes fell freely, we started to understand that vulnerability was not a weakness but a wellspring of strength. By trusting each other with our truths, we created an unassailable support network, each of us vowing to cling tightly to the hope that had begun to unfurl within. As autumn painted our town in shades of rust and gold, I no longer feared that the world we had built would crumble. Instead, I welcomed it with an open heart, understanding that the beauty of our bond lay not just in what we shared, but in the promise of becoming, of growing and changing together. As I looked around our circle, illuminated by the warm glow of soft candlelight, I felt a calmness settle over me. The Fridays were no longer a way to escape into the past, they had grown into a celebration of our present and the radiant future we were all learning to embrace. And as I let out a soft breath, the words of our lives merging into one symphony of resilience echoed in my mind. This was only the beginning. Update: as a final note, I want to share something unexpected that emerged as we continued this journey together. Jake approached me last Friday, excitement shimmering in his eyes, and revealed that he had been writing pieces not just for himself, but for a new collaboration. He mentioned that he was planning to form a band, pulling Clara and me into the mix. The idea of sharing our stories through music and art on an even larger stage frightened me, but looking at the smiles of Clara and Jake ignited something within me, a spark of possibility. So here we are, a week later. I've agreed to join them, taking on the challenge of writing lyrics alongside Jake. The fear remains, but now, more than ever, I recognize the importance of stepping out of my comfort zone. I am ready to explore life's mysteries, both on that canvas and in those melodies. I breathe a little deeper as I consider what lies ahead. Whatever it may be, I know it will be an adventure worth sharing, as we continue to shape our own beautiful, abandoned world together.